Part 60. My lover was restricting my freedom, so no human rights at all. The next day, it was officially the Lotus Appreciation Party held in the White Mansion. Early in the morning, Xuan Huaifeng got up, heard some movement outside, and came out to take a look. Almost all the servants in the mansion were busy with tea bowls and porcelain. Turning around again, the butler is leading a dozen people dressed like farmers in, each holding a jar of beautifully bloomed peony in their hands, and seems to be directing them to various parts of the garden place. Seeing Xuan Huaifeng, the butler hurriedly stopped and called out with a smile, "Adjutant Xuan." Xuan Huaifeng asked, "Where did you get all these flowers? I specially invited people to come here. There is only a pond of lotus flowers, which is not enough to see. The back garden of the mansion is so big. We should add some more. Look, these peonies are still decent, right? There are about 10 mule carts coming from outside." Xuan Huaifeng glanced at it and said, "It's very good. The peony is a flower in May, and now it's July, and it can still bloom objectively and beautifully. People like the flower club are really capable. The first few people holding flower pots. Those people with muddy hands, probably the one who takes care of the flowers in the flower house on weekdays, and today they became a porter by the way." Hearing what Xuan Huaifeng said, they grinned naively. Xuan Huaifeng said to the housekeeper, "I won't delay you, you can go." The housekeeper agreed and led the people to set flowers. Xuan Huaifeng has no official business and can't go out, so he walked around the mansion, remembering the few invitations he sent yesterday, but he didn't see Fusan to reply after that. Whether it was delivered or not, and did the guests promise to come today? Looking left and right, the servants also seemed to be instructed to dress very brightly and beautifully today. They were uniform in new blue cloth tunics, but Fusan was not seen. Xuan Huaifeng originally wanted to ask people and called Fusan over, but after thinking about it, most of the 4 posts were for the sake of repaying favors, and no one was compelled to see them. Since they have already invited them, it is their business if they come or not. So why should they be obsessed? That's it. On this day, Bai Xuelan was also going to work. Xuan Huaifeng looked at the busyness of the people in the White Mansion. And it was more interesting than before. Unexpectedly, when he asked, he realized that Bai Xuelan wouldn't let him worry at all. The butler did it. In addition to buying additional flowers to add interest, he also prepared a variety of high-end dim sums, either Chinese or Western. Afraid that the errands would not be enough, he temporarily invited a group of servants with good looks to treat the guests attentively. A foreign troupe came to add to the fun. Flowers, food, servants, singing and dancing. All these. Xuan Huaifeng made a secret calculation in his heart, and there are all kinds of bosses. Even if the calculation is the most economical, I am afraid that it will cost 1,000 yuan. I can't help but regret it. I knew this before, so I didn't propose to hold a lotus flower party. Really extravagant. At about 5 o'clock, Bai Xuelan came back from the General Administration of Customs. He saw Xuan Huaifeng and asked with a smile, "Did anyone send flowers? Did you see it? Do you like it? In addition to taking care of the body, you also need to relax the mind. You are bored at the company all day, and I have to do things, so I can't accompany you every day. You should see more beautiful flowers and plants to make yourself happy. I have asked, this peony is raised by the Flower Society with a secret recipe. And it won't thank you for a while." Only then did Xuan Huaifeng know that Bai Xuelan bought these flowers for himself. It's hard to say that he wasted it with such a heart. He smiled shyly and said, "Thank you, thank you." Bai Xuelan said, "Why are you being so polite?" Then he added, "I also ask people to prepare British muffins. Not the kind that are smuggled outside and sold under the name of others. It was specially made by an English cook in the restaurant. Didn't you say last time that you like muffins when you were studying abroad? Xuan Huaifeng said, I'm ashamed of you, doing nothing all day, I only know how to eat. In a few days, I will turn into a pig. Bai Xuelan said, I'll see. He reached out and stroked his stomach vaguely, with a slight smile on his lips. After so many days, you haven't gotten fat at all. I'd rather be a little fatter and hug you softly. Xuan Huaifeng blushed, pushed his hand away. After dinner, the clock pointed to between 6 and 7. The invitation said that it would start at 7 o'clock. At this hour, guests had already arrived one after another. The invitation of the chief of customs. Ordinary people would never dare to be late, and would rather be early to that point. Politely, the host should change his clothes and go out to entertain guests. Bai Xuelan said, you should wear a long cedar for an elegant event like viewing flowers. Xuan Huaifeng also agreed. After thinking about it, he smiled and said, you wear a suit all day. Or the military uniform of the General Administration of Customs. In fact, if you wear a long gown, you will have a very fresh bookishness. Bai Xuelan asked, do you remember what I look like in a long gown? Xuan Huaifeng said, why not? We met for the first time in the capital, when you went before to my brother-in-law. Isn't wearing a long gown? Bai Xuelan smiled meaningfully and teased him. Oh, I had a very fresh bookishness on my body that day, so why did you see me like a mouse when you saw me? It's like a cat. Why don't you avoid it? Xuan Huaifeng was at a loss for words, and said embarrassedly, okay, I've suddenly settled the old account. Go and change your clothes. Don't make the guests wait for a long time, it's rude. Xuan Huaifeng and Bai Xuelan changed into a long gown and went out to the front hall to entertain guests. Several guests in the hall. As soon as they arrived, the servants brought hot tea and snacks. They were all sitting and chatting with melon seeds. When they saw the host coming out, they stood up and greeted each other. Bai Xuelan was naturally the worthy protagonist. Because Xuan Huaifeng is really handsome and beautiful, he inevitably attracts attention, but he seldom speaks. Standing behind Bai Xuelan with his hands down, only smiling quietly, and occasionally saying soft words like an adjutant. But most of these guests are unfamiliar. And he is not used to this kind of meaningless communication, and his heart is really boring. After a while, a familiar person finally came. When Xuan Huaifeng saw it from a distance, he was already happy. He whispered hello to Bai Xuelan, went up to meet him, raised his hand and called, Mr. Xie, here. Xie Chaifu came over, went up the high steps, and stepped into the gate. He was already shaken by the prosperity of the White Mansion, so he was at a loss. Hearing Xuan Huaifeng calling him, he hurried over, calmed down a little, and forced a smile. Mr. Xuan, I'm not very comfortable with this kind of situation. Look at my old gown. I should have known that so many dignitaries should come here and make you humiliated. Xuan Huaifeng persuaded with a smile. Flowers are natural. Everyone has the right to appreciate these things. So why shouldn't you come? If you don't come, I'll be even more bored. Come, please sit inside, have some snacks first. And go to see the lotus flowers later. Xie Chaifu has never been in such a gorgeous and rich place. He turned his head and looked at it. It was full of rare decorations. So, he asks, is there anyone I know here? Xuan Huaifeng said, why not? In the Science Advancement Society that you and I joined in the past, there were several young people I could talk to. And I invited them all. I miss those conversations about the time and the bad. I just don't know when the truth will fall. Just then, when I heard someone calling from behind, I looked back and was very happy. It turns out that several friends from the Science Advancement Society also arrived. Like Xie Chaifu, they are not very wealthy people. although they are not ragged. They are dressed in simple and ordinary clothes. They are inevitably out of place among a group of very bright and beautiful government officials. Xuan Huaifeng was very considerate, and immediately invited them all to the small flower hall, sat at a table, asked the servants to bring fruit snacks and tea, and sat and chatted with him. As far as he is concerned, compared to the bureaucrats who are not familiar and have good skills outside, it is better to chat freely with a few familiar friends. Xie Chaifu asked, "Don't you have to go out to entertain?" Xuan Huaifeng said, "No, the chief is entertaining outside. I will also clear you and the others. They haven't arrived yet. Let's chat while I have time. I've been recovering at home for a while, and I don't know what's new outside recently." A friend laughed, pointed at the people around him and said, "If you want something new, you have to ask Wanxian. You don't know, he changed his career recently and went to the newspaper to become a reporter. He is the one who understands current events best." Everyone asked that person to speak. The man named Huang Wanxian used to be a passionate scholar when he was in the Science Progress Society. He often called for science to save the country, so Xuan Huaifeng was very happy to communicate. "Now I don't know how to report to the newspaper office," and after hearing friends encourage him to speak, he squeezed a peanut and chewed it in his mouth. "What can I say? When you become a reporter, you will know what the newspaper says. It's all bullshit. Although I know a little thing, I can only make you feel bad if I say it, so I might as well not say it, so as not to let down the lotus moonlight." The people around him urged him, "Stop putting on airs, just talk." Then Huang Wanxian said, "I recently wrote a press release saying that the son of a wealthy businessman, who was learning to drive a car on the main road, hit and killed a female student who was leaving school, abandoned her body, and walked away." Xuan Huaifeng said in surprise, "How could such a thing happen? The society should be greatly condemned. Why didn't the police department pursue it?" Huang Wanxian sneered, "Don't mention it. This manuscript was cut off by the editor-in-chief, and the newspaper printed it that day. When I came out, I learned that the place where my manuscript should have been published was replaced by a piece of bullshit that a certain celebrity will sing a new play, which made me half dead. I asked the editor-in-chief, but was instead trained. It turned out that the Zhou family son who killed the man not only has money, but also has a very hard backer." According to the editor-in-chief's original words, the surnamed Zhou recognized the godfather as the head of education. How can this be offended? So that female student lost her life in vain. Everyone was very angry and scolded. "What is this? It doesn't make sense?" Bai Xuelan saw Xuan Huaifeng outside and happened to come over, and couldn't help asking, "Why are you so unhappy?" Xuan Huaifeng briefly explained the matter, and said to Bai Xuelan, "Look, this kind of thing can't be angered. You should take care of it." Bai Xuelan said, "This kind of thing happens all over the place, you can take care of it. Are you coming? To tell the truth, I don't know how many refugees and beggars die every day in and out of the city. If it wasn't for a female student who died this time, I'm afraid your friend who is a reporter would not have noticed. Treat it as a piece of news." Huang Wanxian couldn't help but stare. "According to what you said, this kind of thing happens all over the place, so you should just let it go?" Bai Xuelan said, "I didn't say that. It's just, mind your own business, you should look at your own weight first. If you don't have the ability to take good care of the world, you might as well protect a few important people around you before you do anything else." When those people came in, it happened that Bai Xuelan without them. Xuan Huaifeng didn't help them introduce them. But Xie Chaifu knew Bai Xuelan, so he hurriedly interjected and said to Huang Wanxian, "Wanxian, you should change your temper when you are arguing with others. This Chief Pai is the owner of this place. Bai Xuelan turned his head, towards which Xuan Huaifeng nodded slightly. Xuan Huaifeng was stunned for a moment, and muttered, "It turns out that he is the chief again, no wonder." His friend pulled his sleeves before he closed his mouth. How could his words escape Bai Xuelan's pair of spiritual ears? Originally, with Bai Xuelan's status and eloquence, a few words could make him feel embarrassed. But Bai Xuelan saw that Xuan Huaifeng was sitting on the seat, hurting his friend's face. Wouldn't it embarrass Xuan Huaifeng? Bai Xuelan smiled lightly and turned out. Xuan Huaifeng was worried about his anger, and he was very sorry to see him go out in a huff. So, he rushed out and said to him, "My friend is outspoken." "You don't care?" Bai Xuelan asked with a smile. "Then you think of me and him, which side is right?" Xuan Huaifeng answered wisely, saying, "He is idealistic, you are pragmatic, both are correct. However, if I look at my own views, of course, I hope that those who do evil will be rewarded with evil." Bai Xuelan said, "Although you are also idealistic. You are much cuter than your friend." He leaned forward. Xuan Huaifeng saw that he was planning to kiss him here, so he quickly said, "There are people coming and going here. Don't act rashly." Bai Xuelan smiled again, backed away obediently, and said, "That's good, I don't see any indecent assault." "Don't do anything indecent." Xuan Huaifeng said, "Thank you. Go outside to entertain the guests first, I'll accompany these friends, and then come to you." The two separated, and Xuan Huaifeng returned to the small flower hall. Just happened to hear that Xuan Huaifeng is still talking about those sad and irritating current affairs that cannot be published publicly. But a small patrolman in the patrol house, in terms of salary, how much is a month? I don't know how he made the black money. He bought 5 or 6 houses in a few years. Although it is not a good house, rented to those poor people, the monthly rent is enough. That's fine. There was a tenant who owed him 2 months' money, but he couldn't pay it. She closed the door in front of her mother and locked it inside, and she did a beast thing. She reported it to the patrol house, and even said that it was a legitimate rent request. The insulted woman should also be punished as private prostitution. The money for whoring is worth the rent. Every time he said something, everyone scolded him for a round. Later, it was as Xuan Huaifeng said. Xuan Huaifeng then summed up, "In this world, all the officials who are in office have their hearts. If there is no good thing, all of them will be struck by thunder." He said it too directly, small officials. Xuan Huaifeng looked at Xuan Huaifeng with an embarrassed expression, and hurriedly said, "It's totally unreasonable for you to kill a boat of people with such a stick of bamboo. There are many officials with black hearts, but there are also officials who serve the country and the people. Why don't you think about it, Mr. Xuan? Why did he get a bullet a while ago?" Everyone's attention was immediately attracted. Most of them have no good news. And the general administration of customs is not suitable for publicity, so the incident of Xuan Huaifeng's shooting was actually only after he was discharged from the hospital. Now they heard Xuan Huaifeng repeating it again, and they all ask, "It's said outside that he was beaten by tobacco and soil dealers, and he almost demolished the Jinghua building. Is it true?" Even more embarrassed, Xuan Huaifeng nodded and said, "It was in the Jinghua building, but I just happened to go there and accidentally got shot. The one who really did the work was our chief, the one who was just gone by Huaifeng. He held a banquet in the Jinghua building. A smoke and soil dealer named Zhou Huo was ambushed." Xuan Huaifeng said, "Yeah," and said, "This Zhou Huo, I've heard before, is a very vicious underworld gangster, a traitor and criminal. Committing all kinds of evils, and he even carried it on his back. There are a lot of murder cases. Why is it said in the newspapers outside that it was the police chief who set up an ambush and killed him?" As a reporter, he had long understood the methods of newspapers and media. He sighed. "So, Your boss is really a man who dares to act. If all officials are like him. Hey, he was reckless and bumped into him just now. His face turned red. Xuan Huaifeng smiled and said, he's a man with a lot of air. The friends at the same table were afraid of Huang Wanxian's embarrassment, so they changed the subject, and Xie Chaifu smiled again and said, your name is strange. Speaking of which, you and Xuan Huaifeng, we used to teach together and are more familiar than our community members. How can we be called Mr. Xuan, who are all Wan Shan and Cheng Ping? Who shouted at him? Xie Chaifu was stunned for a while, as if he knew that he couldn't explain it. He said, it's a habit. Huang Wanxian passed this little embarrassment and quickly recovered, still in his unruly appearance, and said to the man, what's so strange about this? Don't blame me for speaking the vernacular, although people shouldn't be ranked according to money, wealth, and official position. Their natural temperament is still the same. There is a distinction between high and low. You look at Huaifeng, at first glance, it is upright, elegant and gentle. If it is placed in ancient times, it must be the class of Pan Anlin Ling, which makes people admire the elegant title of Mr. It's perfect for him. Although they didn't see each other very often. A group of nerds had a straightforward nature, and because they were about the same age, they all liked to laugh, so they nodded and said, yes, yes, he is Pan Anlin Ling. And of course he is worthy of Mr. 2 words, we will not call him Huaifeng in the future, only him. Xuan Huaifeng, for some reason, could easily become the subject of conversation wherever he went. He was teased with red cheeks, shook his head and said, you know that. Nonsense. Xie Chaifu was more stable because of the ups and downs. The up airs beat him to teach liberal arts, which is naturally a bit more than the history books they read. He thought of himself, Pan and Lanling, although he was a famous and talented and handsome man in ancient times. But he was born in troubled times and would not end well. He was murdered for treason and the 3 clans were exterminated. Wasn't that Lanling king killed unjustly? Now it's a chaotic world. It's not good to use this as a metaphor for friends. It's not easy to say it clearly, and it's even more taboo. Xie Chaifu asked Xuan Huaifeng, is Chief Pai entertaining guests outside? Do you want to help? Xuan Huaifeng was also embarrassed by the laughter of his friends, and said knowingly, yes. He is too hard. Everyone, sit down for a while, even if you want to eat and drink, even if you instruct the attendant. If you get tired of sitting, please stroll around. Besides the lotus flowers in the garden, there are a lot of peonies, which are blooming just right. He pleaded guilty and went outside. When I went outside, I saw that the entire front hall was crowded with people, talking, laughing, and the Russian troupe invited on the mezzanine, holding violins and other Western musical instruments to perform cheerful tunes, mixed with human voices, making a buzzing sound in the ears. Xuan Huaifeng looked around and quickly found Bai Xuelan. The gown he wore tonight was also moon white, whether intentionally or unintentionally, it was the same color as the one he wore when he first appeared in the Nian's house. Although there were many people here, he stood out from the crowd, and Xuan Huaifeng found him at a glance. Xuan Huaifeng walked towards him happily and approached, only to realize that something was wrong. Although Bai Xuelan had a smile on his face, his eyes were dark, and he was obviously unhappy. Xuan Huaifeng was slightly surprised, and his steps were stagnant. Unexpectedly, Bai Xuelan had already found him, and he made a guilt with the guest who was speaking and walked away. He came over and grabbed his wrist, suppressing his anger, and said coldly, you sent an invitation to Yang Qian? Xuan Huaifeng only then did realize that he had made the old habit of being jealous again. He nodded and said in a low voice, I asked you to let go first. Bai Xuelan squeezed his hand even tighter and asked, Lin Qijun. Did you invite them too? Xuan Huaifeng asked. Have they arrived yet? Bai Xuelan snorted coldly and said, as soon as you come, I ask you where you've been. I said you were looking at lotus flowers and they all ran into the back garden. Go. Let them blow the cold wind by the pond and wake up. Xuan Huaifeng asked, dumbfounded, you are the host, how can you lie to the guests? Bai Xuelan said, I didn't drive them out. I already gave it to you. Save face and see how I settle accounts with you tonight. Suddenly he asked, when did you invite them? Why don't I know? Did you call them in person? You really take them to heart. Xuan Huaifeng saw how he was holding back his anger. If it broke out at night when he was settling accounts, it would be really bad, and he couldn't help explaining. I didn't call, I still treated like other friends and wrote invitations to them. It's just because they came to visit when I was in the hospital, so I'm sorry not to invite them. Bai Xuelan said. Lie, you don't have them in those invitations, don't I know? Xuan Huaifeng gave him a surprised look. I thought to myself, how do you know who the invitations I wrote are inviting? Just thinking about it, he suddenly realized that Bai Xuelan had been secretly censoring his invitations. Instead, it was the 4 supplements that were later written, which were probably handed over to Fu San and sent out, but instead escaped surveillance. Thinking of Bai Xuelan's unreasonable and domineering style, Xuan Huaifeng glared at him angrily. Because there were guests, so he could only curse in a low voice. Bai Xuelan, after all, you have studied abroad too, why do you have any idea of human rights? No? Even the autocratic concept of old China, up to now, is not like you restricting other people's freedom. You let me go. Secretly earning hard, Bai Xuelan was afraid that it would really hurt him. So he had to let go when he saw that he was struggling. Seeing that Xuan Huaifeng lowered his head and put his other hand on his wrist, stroking silently, knowing that he had grabbed too hard, he felt annoyed. Today's lotus flower party was originally held to make him happy. He said that he was a half-owner and could treat guests at will, but now he is angry for Yang Qian and Huaifeng. Huaifeng's single-minded personality, Bai Xuelan knows best, since he is now with Bai Xuelan. No matter how beautiful and capable Yang Qian is, he will not be able to steal Huaifeng's attention. As for Lin Qijun, the opponent who has already been eliminated is worthless. If he destroys his current honeymoon-like relationship with Huaifeng for his sake, wouldn't he look down on him? Thinking about it, regretting doubly, he made a cautious appearance and quietly approached Xuan Huaifeng.